Lake Armitage, New Jersey, did not sleep. It vibrated. The city was a drumhead, and the news was a frantic, accelerating beat tapping against it. The word spat out in whispers from loading docks and echoed in the glass towers overlooking the water. Was that the Peregrine line was broken? Or at least, it was bleeding. Someone had taken a shot at the old man, the Don himself, and missed, but the ricochet had struck his heir. Ezra Peregrine was a ghost before the sun set. He was supposed to be the calm center, the steel-gray eyes that balanced the books and the bodies. Now he was just a rumor with a hidden wound. He had made the car switch, a classic move, textbook, but they had been waiting. He'd felt the punch high on his ribs, a hot, wet tearing, even as his driver took the fatal volley. He'd left his last loyal man slumped over the wheel of a burning sedan. Now, he was alone, pressing a stolen bar towel against his side, the fabric already dark and stiff. The city that was his birthright wanted him dead. His phone, a burner he'd picked up 2 days ago, buzzed with a vibration that felt like it was rattling his cracked rib. A new message. No sender, just words. 3 days left. He deleted it. Another one came almost instantly. Leave the East Coast or lose the line. He crushed the phone under his heel on the wet asphalt of the alley. He did not know who sent them. It hardly mattered. Everyone was a threat. The machinery of the city churned, feigning order. The Bureau of Urban Integrity, a polished acronym for a quasi-public entity that smelled of stale coffee and ambition, held a press conference. They announced Operation Ravenline, a spokesperson, all sharp suit and sharper smile, spoke of combating financial gang activity and restoring integrity to the waterfront. It was theater. Ezra knew, even as he leaned against the brickwork, that someone inside the BUI was selling his coordinates. Ravenline was not an investigation. It was an auction. His life was the prize. Across town, where the smell of diesel and old brine gave way to frying onions and hot coffee, the harbor and hash hummed its own rhythm. It was the 3 a.m. shift. The neon sign outside cast a buzzing, weary pink light onto the wet pavement. Inside, Wren Calder moved with an economy of motion that was almost invisible. She refilled a cup without being asked. She cleared plates before the last bite was gone. She was the night shift, quiet, observant, and existing entirely under the radar. To the regulars, the truckers, and the third shift cops, she was just Wren. To a select few, the ones who came in with a sputtering laptop or a phone that refused to charge, she was Digital Wren. She would take the device to the back, next to the industrial dishwasher, and 5 minutes later, it would work. She never accepted more than the price of a coffee for the fix. Nobody knew about her third-floor apartment. Nobody knew about the small tin box slid under the loose floorboard. It did not hold money. It held a set of meticulously filed lockpicks, graphite powder, a small analog voice changer that ran on a 9-volt battery, and a police scanner she had soldered together herself from scrap parts. Wren Calder collected information. She did not like surprises. Her scanner, tucked in her apron pocket and feeding sound to a single, flesh-toned earbud, crackled with coded chatter. The patrol frequencies were tense. They were all being pulled toward the river. The rumor had found its legs. Ezra Peregrine was somewhere near the water. And the sharks were circling. The Cotivo crew, all neon pink shirts and Florida bravado, had rolled into town in 3 matching sports cars, looking for a quick, loud score. The turtles of docks, the local muscle who thought they owned every piling, were sharpening their hooks, angry at the intrusion. And then there were the others. They wore no colors. They drove unmarked black SUVs and carried equipment bags. They were the private mercenaries of Far South Capital, a hedge fund that bought failing ports and, apparently, hunted men. Lake Armitage was a powder keg, and Ezra Peregrine was the lit fuse. The rain turned from a mist to a deluge just before 4 a.m. It hammered the roof of the harbor and hash, a welcome noise that covered the scrape of the back door. Wren was wiping down the chrome counter, her mind cataloging the exits, the number of patrons 4 and the sound of the grill's pilot light. She felt a change in the air before she saw him, a drop in temperature, a bead of water dripping onto the checkered linoleum where no water should be. She looked up. He was leaning against the jukebox, trying to look casual, but his left arm was pinned to his side, and his face was the color of old ash. He was soaked. But it was not just rain staining his expensive coat. He was tracking darker, thicker drops onto the floor. He was just another stray, another piece of the city's wreckage. But his eyes, they were not desperate. They were analytical, steel gray and sharp. They were scanning the room, assessing her, assessing the cook in the back, assessing the trucker by the window. Cold, suspicious. Wren put her rag down. She did not reach for the phone. She did not call out. She simply met his gaze. The diner was silent. Save for the rain and the low hum of the cooler, the trucker looked up, saw the man, and wisely decided his coffee was finished. He dropped a $5 bill on the table and left, the bell on the door jangling his retreat. Now they were alone, save for the cook, who was half asleep on his feet. The man, Ezra, pushed himself off the jukebox, wincing as the movement pulled at his side. He took a step toward the counter. "I need the bathroom," he said. His voice was a low rasp. "It is for paying customers only," Wren replied, her voice flat, neutral. He slid a crumpled $100 bill onto the counter. It was stained. Wren looked at the money, then back at his eyes. She saw the calculation there, the weighing of risk and reward. She saw the shadow of the Peregrine dynasty. She pushed the bill back toward him. "The key is on the hook, but the lock is busted." She paused, her head tilting just slightly. "You should know that. You own the building." His entire body went rigid. The air cracked between them, a sudden sharp spark of static. His hand, the one that was not pressed to his side, twitched toward the inside of his jacket. He had been found. He had been made. "I do not know what you are talking about," he said, the words clipped. Wren did not blink. She leaned forward, her voice dropping so low it was just for him. A trap sprung in the quiet of the diner. "You should... The rent check clears every month, does it not? Ezra." Ezra's hand was inside his jacket, but the cold, hard object he gripped never cleared the fabric. Wren did not move, did not flinch. She just held his gaze. Then, very slowly, she tilted her head toward the back room. "You are bleeding on my floor, and the cook is about to call the patrols just because he is bored," she said, her voice still a low murmur. "Your assassins, or your business partners, will be here in less than 10 minutes. You need stitches. I have a first aid kit in the office that is meant for grease burns, but it will have to do." He stared, the steel in his eyes warring with the rapidly draining color in his face. He made his choice. He let his hand fall away from his weapon, and he nodded. The office was a closet with a desk. Wren kicked the door shut, muffling the sound of the diner. She flipped a switch on a small, battered radio, and the low, crackling warmth of an old soul tune filled the silence. It was a sound so out of place with the tension that it seemed to instantly calm the air. "Sit," she commanded, pointing to the only chair. She retrieved the kit. It was, as promised, mostly gauze and burn cream, but in the bottom there was a small bottle of high-proof antiseptic, a spool of black thread, and a curved sewing needle. She sterilized the needle in the flame of a lighter and poured the antiseptic onto a clean bar rag. "This will hurt," she said, not unkindly. Ezra had already unbuttoned his shirt, revealing the ragged tear in the flesh high on his left side. It was deep, but it looked like the bullet had passed through. "The coat is ruined," he observed, his voice tight with pain. "I will add it to your rent tab." Wren's hands went to work. She was efficient, her movements precise as she cleaned the wound, but he saw it, a fine, almost imperceptible tremor in her right hand as she held the needle, poised to make the first stitch. She was not a killer. She was not a surgeon. She was just a woman with a steady nerve who was currently terrified, but doing it anyway. It was the most honesty he had seen in months, and it made him trust her more than any soldier his father had ever hired. She worked quickly, her brow furrowed in concentration, the scent of antiseptic, old paper, and her faint, clean soap filled the small space. They used a hollow core, she said, her voice quiet, almost conversational, as she pulled a stitch tight. Ezra flinched, but not just from the needle. You know bullets. I know this neighborhood. She did not look up. The Turtles of Docks, the local crews, they use cheap, tumbling rounds. Whatever they can get. This, she gestured to his side, this is professional, designed to fragment, mercenary ammunition. It is not dock style. She finished, taped a thick pad of gauze over the stitches, and handed him a mug of black coffee. So strong it smelled like tar. You have bigger problems than the local wannabes. He took the mug, his fingers brushing hers. Her skin was warm. He leaned his head back against the wall, the music washing over him. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a cold, creeping exhaustion. The Bureau of Urban Integrity and Far South Capital, he said. His eyes closed. They are in bed together. Someone at the BUI is feeding Far South locations, intel, and Far South. They are bleeding my family's network. Ren stopped organizing the first aid kit, bleeding. Crypto, a slow drain, a few thousand here, a few thousand there. Not enough to freeze the accounts, but enough to cripple us in a week. It is too clean, too surgical. They have someone inside the code. I need someone outside the entire system, someone who does not exist. He opened his eyes. She was watching him, that same unnervingly calm expression on her face. I am a waitress, Ren said flatly. She picked up a cheap desktop calculator from her desk, one of the ones she fixed for the diner. But I can read a system log just by the ozone smell of a cheap power supply. I know when a circuit is lying. She put the calculator down. They are not just bleeding you. They are tracing you. Every transaction is a breadcrumb back to, well, back to here, I imagine. Before Ezra could process that, a new sound cut through the soul music. It was not the rain. It was the sound of heavy engines. Idling in the street out front. Too many. Ren's head snapped up. She killed the radio. In the sudden, thick silence, they heard the heavy thud of combat boots hitting the pavement. A car door slammed, then another. Bounty hunters, Ezra whispered, pushing himself up, his hand going back to his jacket. Ren did not panic. She moved, in one fluid motion. She crossed the diner's back hallway and yanked a large metal lever set in an old fuse box. The entire building plunged into absolute darkness. The hum of the coolers died. The neon sign outside went black. This way, she hissed. She grabbed his hand. Her grip was strong. She led him not through the office, but back into the kitchen. A maze of stainless steel tables he could not see. She navigated it from memory. He could smell old grease, onions, and the sharp metallic scent of the walk-in cooler. The back alley is watched. He panted, the stitches pulling. We are not going to the alley. She pulled him through a narrow, greasy gap between a dishwasher and a triple sink. It was a utility exit, barely wide enough for a mop bucket. Their chests brushed, their hips bumped in the dark. He could feel the rapid, steady beat of her heart against his arm. Or perhaps it was his own. They were pounding in perfect, terrified time. She pushed open a heavy, insulated door, and a blast of frigid, damp air hit them. The walk-in cooler. Hide, she said, pushing him behind a rack of curing hams. It was pitch black inside, and bitterly cold. He heard the kitchen door burst open. Shouts, the sound of heavy equipment being overturned. Ezra's teeth began to chatter, the blood loss and the sudden cold hitting him all at once. He was shivering violently, uncontrollably. He felt her move. She did not say anything. She simply pressed her body against his back, slotting herself between him and the metal wall. She wrapped her arms around his chest. Under his jacket, it was not an embrace. It was a transfer of heat. It was survival. He could feel her breath, warm against his ear. Her hair smelled faintly of mint. Peppermint, she whispered, her voice barely a vibration against his spine. I chew them on shift, helps with the smell of the fryer. He could feel the small, hard shape of a peppermint in her pocket as she pressed against him. He focused on that, on the mint, on the warmth of her body, as the sounds of men ransacking the diner grew closer. The cooler door was ripped open. A bright flashlight beam cut the dark, landing on them. A man in black tactical gear raised a weapon. Ren moved like a snake. She grabbed a heavy steel soup ladle from a hook and swung it, shattering the man's flashlight. Simultaneously, she grabbed a large pot lid, holding it up like a shield. She kicked the safety valve on a nearby carbon dioxide canister. With a deafening hiss, the canister erupted, filling the small space with a cloud of freezing, white gas. The man choked, blinded and disoriented. It was all the time Ezra needed, despite the fire in his side. He lunged forward, grabbing the man's weapon, twisting it, and using the man's own momentum to slam him into the meat rack. The man crumpled, unconscious. Ren did not wait. She grabbed Ezra's hand again. Now we go. They ran, bursting from the cooler, through the wrecked kitchen, and out the back door. Finally spilling into the pre-dawn rain, the alley was chaos. The rest of the team momentarily confused by the sudden loss of their point man. "My car is gone," Ezra gasped, leaning against the wet brick. "They will have this whole block locked down in 2 minutes," Ren said, breathing hard, the rain plastering her hair to her face. He looked at her. She had saved him, twice. "I have a place. Gannett Hill. A brownstone. It is clean. Then we go." She pulled the hood of her flimsy work jacket up. "You are not coming," he said, confused. Ren turned to him, the rain dripping off her nose. Her eyes, even in the dim alley light, were clearer than his had ever been. "I just assaulted an armed man, blew up your diner, and my face is all over your security cameras, which are currently in the hands of those mercenaries. My shift is over. I am changing jobs." She started walking, not looking back to see if he was following. "And you are in no condition to get to Gannett Hill alone." Ezra looked at the unconscious man at his feet, then at the disappearing shadow of the waitress. A decision that would stun the entire city was made in that wet, dark alley. He pushed himself off the wall and followed her into the storm. The brownstone on Gannett Hill was invisible. It hid in plain sight, a perfectly preserved specimen of 19th century architecture, sandwiched between identical neighbors. Its plaque read, "The Stillwater Arts Foundation." Ezra explained it had been one of his grandfather's first and most successful. Shells, a place to store art, history, and secrets. It smelled of lemon oil, old books, and dust. It was silent. It was a fortress. Ren moved in just after dawn, having slipped through the city's awakening streets. She carried one small, scuffed suitcase and a heavy-duty toolbox that looked like it belonged to a power company technician. Ezra had already disarmed the perimeter sensors. He led her into the study, a room paneled in dark wood, where a bank of monitors showed grainy, black and white feeds of the street and hallways. Ren set her toolbox down, looked at the flickering screens, and let out a small, almost soundless laugh. "This is your security?" she asked. "It is closed circuit, analog, unhackable," Ezra said, his voice defensive. He was sitting heavily in a leather armchair, the pain meds he'd taken making his movements sluggish. "It is antique," she countered, opening her box. It was not filled with wrenches. It was filled with spools of fine wire, micro cameras the size of a shirt button, and custom soldered circuit boards. It is not unhackable. It is just irrelevant. A kid with a $50 signal jammer could blind this entire setup. And these camera angles are terrible. She unplugged his entire system. The screens went black. Ezra's breath hitched. "What are you doing?" "Upgrading." She tossed him a small, wireless earpiece from her kit. "Put that in. It is paired to my audio feed only. Now, we establish the new terms of tenancy." She worked as she talked, her hands moving with deft, practiced speed. She mapped out the new camera placements, using the existing wiring but replacing the endpoints. "I have 5 rules," she said, her back to him as she modified a motion sensor. 1. No lying about medicals. If you are dizzy, If the wound opens, you tell me. I am your only medic." She moved to the window, placing a tiny sensor in the frame. 2. No accessing the secure network when your heart rate is above 95 beats per minute. Panic makes you sloppy. You will get us both killed. How do you know my heart rate? She tapped a device on her own wrist, then pointed a small, laser-like tool at him. I am running biometrics on you. You are rule number 1. Now you are rule number 2. She came to the center of the room. 3. No guns in the kitchen. That is my new office. You want to eat, you come unarmed. That is absurd. That is the rule, she said, her voice firm. 4. We need a stress safe word, not a word for danger, a word for de-escalation. When one of us says it, the other one stops talking, stops moving, and breathes. The word is a ledger. He considered it, a word that meant balance, facts, the bottom line. It suited them. He nodded. And 5. She finally turned to look at him. Her tools set aside for a moment, her eyes were serious. 1 hour, every night, just before dawn, the hour when the city is quietest. We call it the truth hour. We turn off the machines, we sit in the same room, and we tell each other one true thing, no matter how small, no lies allowed in the house after dark. It was the strangest, most intimate, and most terrifying set of terms he had ever heard. Fine, he said. The first truth hour came 20 hours later. The new security system was online, a web of digital precision visible only to Wren. She had made a stew, thick and hot, in the brownstone's pristine, unused kitchen. She had enforced rule number 3, taking the pistol from his waistband herself and placing it on the hall table before letting him sit. Now, the stew was gone, and the dishes were clean. They sat in the study, the lights low. The only sound was the house settling. Your turn to start, Ezra said. Wren looked at her hands. My older brother was not in the life, and he was a coder, brilliant. He got scooped up in a raid. They said it was a mistake. Wrong address. They held him for 72 hours. He never spoke again after they let him out. Just disappeared. Went missing. That was 6 years ago. That is why I learned to listen to machines. They tell the truth more often than the people running them. Ezra was silent for a long moment. He looked at the painting on the wall. One his mother had loved. My mother, he said, his voice rough. She made me promise her, before she died, that I would not let the family get bought, that I would not let the far souths of the world turn us into another column on their stock portfolio, she said. I would rather we go down in flames as peregrines than live on our knees as employees. I am failing that promise. The hour passed. The fragile, dangerous truce between them had solidified. The next afternoon, Wren needed to change his bandages. The wound was angry, red at the edges. You have been moving too much, she admonished, her fingers gentle as she cleaned the stitches. I am not good at sitting still. He hissed as the antiseptic touched the skin. Her hands were on him, warm and capable. He could feel the calluses on her fingertips, a slight roughness that was grounding. She was leaning close, the scent of her skin, clean soap and something metallic, like her tools, filling his senses. You are very good at this, he murmured, his eyes on the line of her jaw. She glanced up, her gaze meeting his. The air in the room suddenly became very thick. He saw the slight flush on her cheeks. I told you, I patched things up. Grease burns, bullet holes, all just systems that need mending. She finished the bandage, her fingers lingering a fraction of a second too long on his uninjured skin. A light, brushing touch just below his ribs. He watched her swallow. A skilled nurse with no license, he said, his voice softer than he intended. She pulled her hand away, breaking the spell. Do not move so much, she said, all business again as she packed the kit. But the spark had been lit. Later that night, Wren was deep inside the house's internet connection, which she had rerouted through 3 continents. She was hunting the slow bleed from Ezra's accounts. It is not a direct hack, she muttered, her eyes scanning lines of code. It is a transaction. It looks legitimate, like a payment, a recurring one. She traced it. The payments were being routed through a shell company. The shell company was paying for a commercial internet line, a line registered to a small business in Lake Armitage. Her blood went cold. "Ezra," she said, her voice tight. He was at her side in an instant. She pointed to the screen, to the address. "It is a relay," she said, her voice shaking with a cold anger. "The signal, the one draining your money. It is bouncing off a node located at the Harbor and Hash, my diner." She slammed her fist on the desk. "They are using my workplace. Someone is inside." She stood up, grabbing her jacket. "Where are you going?" Ezra demanded. "Standing to." "Back to the diner. They will be closed for the investigation, but the power will be on. That router is still live. I need to get to it." "No, it is a trap. It has to be. You cannot go alone." He reached for his gun on the table. "Ledger," she said, her voice sharp. He froze. His hand stopped, hovering over the weapon. He met her eyes. "Rule number 3, she said softly. "No guns in the kitchen, and this is my kitchen. My problem, I know every wire, every loose floorboard in that building. I will be in and out in 20 minutes. If I am not back in 30, you can assume the worst and start your own fire." He hated it. Every instinct screamed at him to go with her, to protect her, but he saw the resolve in her eyes. She was not asking for permission. "You will not follow me," she stated. It was not a question. 30 minutes, he said, his jaw tight. She was gone in 28. She slipped back into the brownstone as the sky was turning a bruised purple, silent as a shadow. She looked pale but calm. She walked into the study where he was pacing and placed 2 things on his desk. The first was a paper-wrapped bundle from the diner's kitchen. It was a stack of pancakes, cold and rubbery. The second was a small, black USB drive. "What is that?" he asked. "It was hidden in the large kitchen sugar dispenser," Wren said, her voice grim. "The one only the night shift uses. It was taped to the bottom. It is either a trap, a gift, or a very, very stupid mistake." Wren would not plug a strange drive into her main system. That was rule number 1 of digital survival. In the brownstone's dusty attic, she found what she was looking for: an old beige laptop from the early 2000s, a relic from the Stillwater Foundation's first attempt at cataloging art. It had no wireless card and had not been connected to a network in at least a decade. It was an air-gapped sandbox. She booted it up, the machine whining in protest, and inserted the drive. It was not a bomb. It was not a complex virus. It was a single PDF file. "BUI charitable contributions," she read aloud, her voice tight with confusion. Ezra stood behind her, his presence a heavy weight in the small, cold room. He was still injured, but his restlessness was a tangible thing. The file was exactly what it claimed to be: a boring, multi-page ledger of donations, the Bureau of Urban Integrity, giving money to youth centers, dock workers' unions, homeless shelters. "It makes no sense," Ezra said, leaning over her shoulder. "Why hide this? It is public relations fluff." "Wait." Wren's fingers clicked on the keyboard, navigating to the file's properties, the data hidden behind the data, the metadata. "Here." She pointed. "File created 3 days ago. Author J. Hollis. Company Far South Capital." Ezra went still. They are not just sloppy. They are arrogant. They are using the BUI as their public relations department while they launder their reputation. Wren said, "This file was not a trap for us. It was a message, dropped in the sugar, meant for someone else at the diner to pick up, a status report, and now we have it." "We leak it," Ezra said immediately. "Burn them both." "No." Wren closed the laptop, a new, sharp light in her eyes. "If we leak it, they just deny it and change their methods. We do not want to scare them. We want to catch them." She went downstairs to the kitchen, her new office, and sat at the small table she had set up with her own equipment. "They are using old-fashioned dead drops. We are going to build them a new one." Her fingers flew across her keyboard. I am creating a new cryptocurrency wallet. We will call it the Peregrine Emergency Fund. I will seed it with a few thousand from one of your cleaner accounts." "And they will find it," Ezra said, recognizing the strategy. "They will," Wren agreed, "but I am building it with a flaw, a deliberate, tiny, beautiful vulnerability in the transfer protocol. It is an open door, disguised as a keyhole. They will think they are breaking in. They will think I am an amateur who got sloppy, and when their hacker tries to exploit that flaw to drain the wallet, the protocol will reverse. It is a honeypot. It will not just block them, it will trap their credentials and give me a direct look inside their system." Ezra paced the kitchen. This was not his world. He solved problems with leverage, loyalty, and, when necessary, blunt force. This silent digital warfare made his skin crawl. "I should be out there," he muttered. Wren did not look up. This is the new battlefield. Right now. I need you to stand back and trust me. I know this language." He stopped pacing. He looked at her. The way the low kitchen light caught the intense focus in her expression. She was not a waitress. She was a weapon. And she was on his side. He nodded once and leaned against the wall. He would learn to stand back. The trap was set. Now, they listened. That night, the rain returned. A cold, driving sheet against the brownstone's thick windows. Wren's police scanner was hissing with static. "The walls are too thick," she said, frustrated. "The signal is garbage. I need to get the antenna on the roof." From her heavy toolbox, she pulled a collapsible aluminum Yagi antenna. It looked like the skeleton of a prehistoric fish. The roof was a treacherous landscape of wet slate and old copper flashing. The wind whipped at them, threatening to tear the antenna from Wren's grasp. Below, Lake Armitage was a glittering, blurred tapestry of lights. "Hold the mast," she yelled over the wind. "It has to be steady, pointed east." Ezra, his coat pulled tight, gripped the base. His side was a dull, hot ache. Wren knelt, her fingers, red and numb with cold, fumbling to connect the fine coaxial cable. "I cannot get it," she grit out, her teeth chattering. "My fingers are too cold." Ezra watched her. He saw the flicker of frustration, the sheer human exhaustion under the digital precision. He let go of the mast with one hand and covered hers. His hand was large, scarred, and warm. He did not take the cable from her. He simply enveloped her frozen fingers, his thumb rubbing firmly over her knuckles, forcing warmth back into them. "Breathe," he said. His voice was a low rumble, barely audible but felt more than heard. Wren stopped, rigid. She looked at their joined hands, his. A map of street fights and hard decisions. Hers, a technician's, calloused from tools and hot plates. She looked up. His steel-gray eyes met hers. The city lights were reflected in her gaze, a million pinpricks of data. His heart, which had been pounding a steady, pained rhythm, suddenly stuttered. He felt her pulse leap under his thumb, a frantic, bird-like beat. For a second, their rhythms were a chaotic mess. Then, slowly, as if drawn by a magnet, they found a new cadence, a steady, shared beat against the noise of the storm. He slowly released her hand. She took a sharp, shaky breath and, in one clean motion, snapped the connector into place. The scanner in her pocket crackled to life, loud and clear. They huddled in the attic, dripping on the floorboards, listening to the city's secret conversations. Static, patrol calls, and then a voice. It was different. Not a cop. It was filtered, cold. "Ravenline wants the package. 0600, Pier 3. Ezra tensed. "Ravenline, the BUI op." "And package," Wren whispered, already on a small, hardened tablet, tapping into the Port Authority database. "That is not gang code. That is an agent. Why are they on an open frequency?" "They are not," Wren said, her face illuminated by the screen. "This is a low-band, encrypted channel. But this antenna is better than theirs. Pier 3. It is closed for maintenance. No ships, but it is not secured by the port. It is secured by a private firm, Cranewatch Security." She clicked another link. Her face went pale. What Ezra demanded: Crane Watch, their entire executive roster, all former logistics managers from far south capital. It is a handover, Ezra said, the pieces fitting together with cold, brutal clarity. The BUI is not hunting me. They are selling me. At 5:45 a.m., the sky was a bruised, nauseous gray. Two figures in orange safety vests and hard hats walked onto Pier 3, carrying clipboards. The Crane Watch guard, bored and wet, just waved them through. The sensors at the end of the pier are malfunctioning, Wren said loudly, her voice echoing in the fog. From her belt, she unclipped the small silver box she called her Heir sensor. What does it see? Ezra murmured, scanning the empty pier. It sees the air, she whispered back, and the air is nervous. 2, in that SUV, heavy metal, rifles, 3 more, under the pier itself. Pistols, they are not here for maintenance. A black sedan rolled onto the concrete. 2 men in dark suits stepped out. Bui, Wren's device chirped softly, armed, standard. A moment later, a second, more expensive car arrived. It glided to a halt. One person got out of the back, tall, impeccably dressed, face hidden in the fog. The BUI agent stepped forward. We have confirmation. The asset is loose, but contained. We will have him by noon. The tall figure spoke. The voice was smooth, androgynous. The kite owner is not patient. The rights to the Newport development are contingent on receiving the package, alive. Ezra felt the blood drain from his face. The package, me, they were trading him, his life, his name, for real estate. A white-hot, pure rage he had not felt since his youth washed over him. He was not a man to them. He was a commodity. He took a step forward, his hand sliding under his vest to the pistol he had refused to leave behind. No! Wren's hand shot out, drying or grabbing his forearm in a steel grip. They are selling me like a piece of meat, he snarled, trying to pull free. She did not let go. In one fluid, desperate motion, she stepped directly in front of him, pressing her body against his, blocking his path. Her other hand came up, gripping his bicep. She turned her head, her mouth so close to his ear he could feel the warmth of her breath. She did not shout. She did not plead. She whispered, and her voice cut through his fury like a diamond. Ledger. The word, the safe word. It struck him like a physical blow. He froze, his muscles locked. She did not move away. She stayed right there, a solid, living shield against his own self-destruction. Her breath was warm and steady against his skin. Do not let them see you, she whispered, her voice a low, intense vibration that calmed the storm inside him. Do not let them win. You are not a package. You are Ezra Peregrine. They are businessmen, and you are about to become the cost of business they cannot afford. The absolute intimacy of it. Her body pressed against his, her voice in his ear, her hand gripping his arm, was a shock to his system. It was not desire, it was control. It was an anchor in the middle of his rage. He did not relax, but the murderous impulse receded. He slowly, deliberately, let his hand fall away from his gun. Good, she breathed. She stepped back, and they were instantly 2 technicians again, invisible in the fog. We have their faces, we have their voices, we have the deal. Now we walk away. As the BUI agents and the kite owner's proxy shook hands on their treason, Ezra and Wren turned their backs and disappeared into the morning mist. The kitchen, bathed in the gray light of almost dawn, had become their command center. It was the only room in the house that felt alive. Wren was at her laptop, a small smile playing on her lips. What Ezra asked, he was sitting at the table, nursing a mug of coffee, his side aching less, his mind clearer. I am in the BUI's internal server, she said, not looking up. Their firewall is a joke. It is like they want people to see their cafeteria menu. She picked up the small analog voice changer from her toolbox, held it to her throat, and spoke in the clipped, official tone of the BUI spokesperson. A reminder that Tater Tot Day has been moved to Friday. Maintain urban integrity. Ezra stared at her. She switched it off, her own voice returning. What I like, tater tots. A sound he did not recognize rumbled in his chest. It took him a second to realize it was a laugh. It was rusty, and it pulled at his stitches. But it was real. He was smiling. The sight of it, this genuine, unguarded expression, made Ren pause. Her own smile softened. That is the first time I've seen that, she said quietly. It is the first time in a long time, he admitted. But the quiet of the brownstone was a lie. The city was still hunting. That night, the stress found the cracks. Ren was woken by a sound, a sharp, choked gasp, not from her systems, but from the room down the hall. She found Ezra tangled in his sheets, his eyes wide and unseeing, his breath coming in ragged, desperate pulls. He was not in the brownstone. He was back in the burning car, back on the pier. He was fighting, his hands clenched. Ezra, she said, her voice sharp. He did not hear her. She moved without thinking, acting on the new, strange instincts this man brought out in her. She sat on the edge of the bed, not in front of him, but behind him. She slid her arms around his chest, a mirror of their first contact in the freezing cold of the diner's walk-in. He flinched, his muscles like steel, ready to strike. Ledger, she whispered, her voice firm, right against his ear. Ledger, you are here. You are in the brownstone. The door is locked. The system is online. She pressed her hand flat against his chest, right over his heart, willing her own calm to seep into him. She could feel the frantic, rabbit pulse of his heart. Breathe with me, she commanded softly. In, 2, 3, out. His breath was still a gasp. His body was rigid, a coiled spring of violence and memory. She did not let go. She held him. Her cheek pressed against his shoulder blade, her hand steady on his chest. Ledger. Slowly, like a great machine grinding to a halt, the tremor in him subsided. The steel in his shoulders softened. His breathing, still ragged, began to slow, matching the rhythm she was whispering. He let his head fall back, his neck resting against her shoulder. He did not speak. He just breathed. She stayed there until his heartbeat was a steady, heavy thump beneath her palm. They cannot have you, she whispered, as much to herself as to him. From that night, a new language was born. The truth hour was too formal. This was constant. When one of them got lost in the data, or the rage, or the fear, the other would reach out, a hand placed gently on the other's wrist. 1 tap, I am here. 2 taps, breathe. It became their anchor. The tension in the house was no longer just about survival. It was about proximity. It was about the shared glances over lines of code, the accidental brush of hands in the narrow hallway, the knowledge that this one person was the only other soul on their isolated island. It was a rainy Tuesday night when it finally broke. They had been working for 48 hours straight, tracing the kite owner's proxy, and had hit a wall of encryption. The rain hammered the windows, a relentless percussion. Frustration was high. It is useless, Ezra said, turning away from the screen, his face grim. We are just waiting for them to find us. They will not find us, Ren said, her voice tight with exhaustion. How can you know that he snapped? Because I am better than they are, she snapped back, standing up. And then they were just standing there, in the middle of the study, breathing hard. The air was electric, charged with sleeplessness and fear and something else. Something hot and undeniable. Ezra, she said, and his name was a plea. He crossed the small space between them. He did not touch her. He just looked at her, his steel gray eyes searching her face as if she were the last piece of code he could not crack. Ren, he said, and his voice was rough. She reached up, her fingers trembling, and placed her hand on his wrist. 1 tap. I am here. He covered her hand with his. He did not tap back. He turned his wrist, lacing his fingers with hers. He lifted her hand not to his lips but to his chest, pressing her palm against his heart. She could feel the steady, slow beat. He was anchoring her. The rain beat against the glass. The single yellow desk lamp cast everything in a warm, intimate glow. His other hand came up, gently, to cup her jaw. His thumb brushed her cheek. "You are not a waitress," he whispered. "You are not a package," she whispered back. His coat, still damp from a trip to check the perimeter, slid from his shoulders and fell to the chair, the sound unnervingly loud in the silence. He leaned in. The kiss was not gentle at first. It was desperate. It was the release of every ounce of tension, fear, and adrenaline from the last week. It was a collision, a claiming. But as her hands came up to grip his shirt, as she kissed him back with the same urgent hunger, it changed. His mouth softened, the desperation bled away, replaced by a deep, profound tenderness that made her knees weak. His hands moved from her face to her back, pulling her closer, not with force, but with a need that was more powerful. Her fingers unlaced from his to thread into his hair. They whispered each other's names, a broken, breathless litany. It was a promise. It was a surrender. He held her, his forehead pressed to hers, and for the first time in a week, they both breathed, their breath mingled. A single cloud in the warm light of the study. His hand found hers again, his fingers locking with hers, a grip that said, "I will not let you go." The morning found them in the kitchen. It was not awkward. It was professional, with a new, humming undercurrent. Ren was at her laptop, wearing one of Ezra's soft gray t-shirts, which hung almost to her knees. She was eating a bowl of oatmeal. Ezra sat on the floor by her chair. He was not eating. He was tying the laces of her practical, worn-out work boots. His movements were careful, methodical, a silent, futile promise. He was her man. She was his. Then the world intruded. Ren's screen flashed with a priority alert from her own network scan of the local news. "Oh no," she breathed. She clicked the link. It was a grainy security video. The back alley of the Harbor and Hash. It showed Ezra, wild-eyed and bleeding, pulling her out of the kitchen. It was cut just so. The mercenaries and tactical gear completely edited out. It looked exactly like an abduction. The headline, Peregrine Heir abducts local waitress. Citywide manhunt. "They are plastering my face everywhere," Ren said, her voice hollow. "My old landlord and my old life." "The BUI just issued a warrant," Ezra said, his voice cold, reading from another feed, "for your arrest as a material witness and a person of interest, an accomplice." Ezra stood up, his face a mask of stone. He went to the hall and picked up his gun. "Ezra, what are you doing?" "I'm ending this," he said, his voice flat. "I will turn myself in. I will give the kite owner his package, but I will make them release you. I will tell them you were a hostage. You will be safe." "No." She was in front of him before he reached the door, blocking his path. "You walk out that door, and we are both dead. I am not your weakness. Ezra, I am your alibi." He tried to step around her. "Ren, move." "No." She put her hands on his chest, right over his heart. "They are not doing this to get you. They are doing this to get me, to separate us. Because they know, as long as I am with you, you are invisible. As long as I am with you, you have a shield they cannot break." He looked down at her, the fury and the terrible, self-sacrificial nobility warring in his eyes. She did not move her hands. She leaned in, pressing her forehead against his. It was a mirror of the pier, a mirror of the kiss, a promise. "You are not turning yourself in," she vowed, her voice fierce. "We are not hiding. We are going to move. A new safe house, one they will never see coming. We are going to get loud. We are going to move in together. In public." The new safe house was not a fortress of old stone. It was a sterile, high-rise apartment on the 32nd floor, all glass and white marble, paid for by one of Ezra's long-dormant corporate accounts. It was a place designed to be seen. And Ren was putting on a show. At 8 a.m., she went live. The stream was called Kitchen Truths. She used a simple, high-definition camera, the one from her toolbox, aimed at a pristine, modern kitchen. In the background, through a plate glass window, the entirety of Lake Armitage glittered like a circuit board. Wren was making pancakes. "Morning, everyone," she said, her voice bright and impossibly calm. "Wren called her here. You might have seen my picture in the news. Apparently, I am a hostage." She laughed, a light, airy sound, as she flipped a perfect pancake. "Well, as you can see, I am being held in a terrible, terrible kitchen, the hostage taker. However, has no idea how to make a decent breakfast." She panned the camera slightly. Ezra was sitting at the marble island, wearing a dark sweater. He looked stiff, unused to the spotlight. "This is Ezra," Wren said, as if introducing a new friend. "He is the alleged kidnapper. He's also, it turns out, really good at washing dishes." Ezra looked at the camera, his steel gray eyes unblinking. Wren, off camera, tapped her wrist twice. "Breathe." A small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "She is a terrible guest," he said, his voice a low rumble. The internet exploded. The stream chat went from vitriol to confused fascination in under 30 seconds. "Today on Kitchen Truths," Wren continued, turning back to the stove, "we're talking about ethics, specifically port ethics, supply chains, knowing where your stuff comes from. It is so important to have transparency, is it not? You would not want to find out that the people handling your, say, charitable donations are the same people moving less savory things." She was a master. She and Ezra were not fugitives. They were a showrunner and her reluctant, handsome star. She was flipping the narrative. Later that day, she posted her riddle on the stream's new social media page. It was a link to the BUI's public donation ledger. Just doing some light reading. She wrote, "Can anyone figure out the connection between all these youth centers? It is a puzzle." It took the internet 4 hours. Someone cross-referenced the donation recipients' addresses with property records. They were all owned by the same holding company, a company with a whimsical, anonymous name, Nesting Box Holdings. The money laundering front was exposed. Far South Capital did not appreciate the joke. Their response was brutal. By evening, every major news outlet was running a new video. It was grainy, dark, and showed Ezra at what looked like a bar. He was seen shoving a man violently, shouting. The man fell backward and the clip cut. It was dated 6 months ago. The headline, "The Real Ezra Peregrine, A History of Violence." In the glass apartment, Ezra's hands clenched. "That was a setup. That man worked for my uncle. He was armed." "I know," Wren said. She was already at her laptop, queuing up a file. "They are so predictable." She went live again. No kitchen this time. Just her face, serious, looking directly into the camera. "Far South Capital thinks you are stupid," she said, her voice cold. "They just released a video of Ezra. They cut it, of course. They are very good at cutting things. Cutting footage, cutting deals, cutting people out. They forgot I was at the pier." She hit a key. A new video feed filled the screen. It was her buffer cam footage, the high-resolution file saved from her own equipment on Pier 3. It showed the full, unedited exchange. It showed the BUI agents. It showed the Crane Watch guards. It showed the proxy for the kite owner. "This is the full video," she said. "Far South does not want you to see it. Neither does the Bureau of Urban Integrity." The fallout was immediate. The BUI was forced to schedule an emergency public hearing. Wren watched the news feed, her expression grim. The BUI spokesperson was replaced by a beleaguered-looking man who promised full cooperation. But Wren's eyes were on the man sitting just behind him, a deputy director, his face impassive, his nameplate identifying him as D. Heron. He was the only one in the room who looked utterly, terrifyingly calm. That night, a message appeared on her private, encrypted terminal. It had bypassed all her firewalls. It was one sentence. "Stop if you want Ezra alive." Ezra saw it over her shoulder. The rage was back, cold this time. "They are threatening you." "No," Wren said, her fingers already flying. "They are threatening you to control me. It is a leverage play, and it means we have them scared. So we hide. We go dark. No. We doubled down. She turned in her chair to face him. We are going to set a hook. I am going to respond to them. I will agree to a meeting. Absolutely not, Ezra said. The words were flat, final. I will agree to meet the kite owner at the old Armitage Bridge. Midnight tomorrow. Wren, you are not going... I know, she said. It is a lie. The bridge has been wired for demolition for 10 years. It is a death trap. But I have 3 thermal imaging drones that I can park over it. When they send their team to scout it, we will see their faces, their equipment, and we will know who they are. He hated it. He hated every part of her being the bait. He started to pace, the caged animal energy returning. I will not let you put a target on your back. Ledger, she said. He stopped. He breathed, but his hands were still fists. She stood up and went to him, placing her hand on his chest, right over his heart. Look at me. This is not a risk. This is a calculation. They think I am a hostage who got lucky. They do not know I am a hunter, but they are not the only ones we need to flush out. She took his hand, lacing her fingers with his. You are the bait, Ezra. You are the big, expensive prize. I am just the line attached to you. They cannot get to you without pulling me, and my line has hooks. The next morning, Wren made one final post before shutting down the stream. It was nonsensical, a move of pure, chaotic strategy. To the kite owner, I am tired of this. I will meet you, noon, tomorrow, at the main fountain in the city plaza. I will be the one in the red coat. Come alone. Ezra looked at her, baffled. The plaza, that is public. That is suicide. It is right below this window, Wren said, pointing down 32 floors. They will not show up. It is too stupid, too open. They will know it is a trick. They will go to the bridge, the real spot. But the bounty hunters, the Cautivo crew, the turtles of docks, they are not smart. They are greedy. And so they waited. As 11:55 a.m. approached, Wren and Ezra stood at the massive plate glass window, a godlike view of the city plaza below. Here they come, Wren murmured. The plaza, moments before filled with tourists and lunch-hour workers, began to fill with new, uglier elements. Men in bright Florida shirts trying to look inconspicuous. Thugs with dock hooks visible under their jackets. Men in cheap suits trying to look like BUI. At noon, all hell broke loose. A Cautivo member spotted a turtle, and a shoving match began. Someone mistook a plainclothes cop for a far south mercenary and threw a punch. Within 90 seconds, the plaza was a swirling, idiotic brawl. Ezra watched, stunned. Wren was not watching the fight. She was watching her monitors, her thermal cameras zooming in, her facial recognition software working overtime. Got them, she whispered, her voice a thrill. There is Far South's tactical leader. There is the head of the Cautivo crew. And look, BUI agents, not arresting anyone, just observing, just mapping the competition. She turned to Ezra, her eyes brighter than the city lights. We did not just flush them out, we just got a complete schematic of the entire war. Wren worked while Ezra slept, a rare moment of peace he only allowed in her presence. She sat surrounded by the components of her next move, the chimney sweep. Her mind, however, was 6 years in the past. It was on her brother, the way he had stared at the wall after the BUI released him, his brilliant mind shattered by a wrong address raid that had been lethally precise. That was the day Wren had stopped trusting the official record. It was the day she had started learning the real languages, the language of radio frequencies, of tumblers clicking in a lock, and of the quiet, roguish ethics that said you protect the person you choose, not the system that fails them. Ezra was the one she had chosen. The plan was simple, almost elegant. She would use a modified transmitter to broadcast a fake, high-value data signature from a derelict warehouse in the ship graveyard. It would mimic the Peregrine Ledger, a massive prize. Far South and their Crane Watch muscle would swarm to it, expecting to trap Ezra, while they were busy chasing a ghost. A secondary, automated script would upload the real data, the Nesting Box Holdings ledger. The BUI Far South Connection, the peer footage to 3 independent journalism servers, set to publish on a dead man's switch. But the city always had its own script. An encrypted message came to Ezra's burner phone. It was from his uncle, August Peregrine, the man who had sold Ezra's father out for a stake in a Florida shipping line. He wanted to talk. He wanted peace. The meet was at noon. In a small, windswept park by the marina, Ezra went, his face a mask of cold necessity. Wren was not with him. She was on a rooftop half a mile away, watching through a high-powered spotting scope, her laptop plugged into a directional microphone aimed at the park. August was all false smiles and expensive cologne. "Ezra, my boy, this has gone too far. Far south. They are animals. Let us find common ground, a conditional peace." Ezra said nothing, his stance rigid. On the rooftop, Wren frowned. She was listening, but she was also watching. The audio feed was clean, but her frequency analyzer, pointed at August, was picking up a high-band spike. It was coming from his tie clip. It was not a recording, it was a live feed. She traced the signal. It was a short-range BUI frequency, terminating in an unmarked surveillance van, parked 3 blocks away. August was wearing a wire, reporting directly to the bureau. Before she could even key her microphone to warn Ezra, everything went wrong. A black SUV, not August's, screeched onto the curb, then another. Men in the gray and black uniforms of Crane Watch poured out. They were early. They were not supposed to be here. August looked, for a genuine second, terrified. They were not his backup. They were Far South's, and they were blowing up the BUI's entire operation. Wren moved. She had a contingency for chaos. She had a single key on her laptop. A block over, a pre-planted industrial road flare, mounted on the side of a building, ignited. It did not just glow, it exploded with a deafening pop, showering the area in a blinding silver-white phosphorus smoke. The park was instantly engulfed, shouts, confusion. Ezra moved, using the smoke as a weapon. He found Wren already halfway to him, a ghost in the swirling silver. He grabbed her hand and pulled her into the only cover available, the narrow gap between 2 massive steel shipping containers. The air was thick with smoke. Bullets ricocheted off the steel, the sounds deafeningly close. Ezra pushed her back against the container wall, his body shielding hers. His hand, purely on instinct, came up to cover the back of her head, pressing her face into his shoulder, protecting her from the shrapnel and noise. "They are here," he growled, his voice a low vibration against her ear. She tilted her head back. In the glittering, chaotic dust, their eyes met. There was no fear in hers, only focus. In that instant, they were not a boss and a bodyguard, not a fugitive and a tech. They were just a single, breathing unit. Then, the BUI sirens, the real BUI. They stormed the park, not in tactical gear, but in standard uniforms, their presence instantly freezing the Crane Watch team, who were now caught in an illegal operation. An agent, one Wren recognized from the pier, spotted them. There they are. Secure the assets. They were grabbed, hands zip-tied. "You are being taken into protective custody," the agent shouted over the din, shoving them toward an armored transport van. But the van did not turn toward BUI headquarters. It turned toward the water, descending into the dark, echoing maw of the old harbor tunnel. "This is not protective custody," Ezra said, his voice flat. He was testing the ties. "No signal down here," Wren whispered. The tunnel was a notorious dead zone, a perfect place for a handover. They sat in the dark, the van rumbling. Ezra was looking at her, a silent question in his eyes. Wren smiled, a small, grim curve of her lips. She did not need to speak. She shook her hair, and a small, thin piece of metal, bent into the shape of a hairpin, fell into her waiting palm. She had tucked it into her ponytail. She twisted her hands. The metal slid into the zip tie's locking mechanism, a tiny click. Her hands were free. Ezra let out a low, rough breath that was almost a laugh. His eyes, even in the dim light, were full of a weary, profound admiration. You are not a normal waitress. She moved to the grated window between the cab and the back. The driver has a partner. They are slowing for the canal junction. When I say now, throw your entire weight to the left. Aim for the high side of the turn. She waited. The van began its slow, sweeping right turn. Now. She unhooked a small fire extinguisher from the wall and, at the same moment, Ezra threw his 190 pounds of muscle against the left wall. Ren smashed the extinguisher into the dividing window. The driver screamed, wrenching the wheel. The van, already unbalanced, top-heavy, and turning too fast, fought gravity for a split second. Then it gave up. With a horrifying shriek of metal, the van tipped, slammed onto its side, and skidded, sparks flying into the tunnel wall. The back doors burst open. They were bruised, battered, but moving. They crawled out into the dark, ankle-deep in brackish tunnel water. Alarms blared. They ran. They found an auxiliary maintenance channel, a dark, narrow pipe slick with algae. It opened out into the secondary canal. They plunged in. The water shockingly cold. They swam, strokes in unison until they could drag themselves up onto a rotting, abandoned pier. They collapsed, shivering, coughing up the foul water. The rain had started again, washing the grime from them. Ezra looked at her, her face pale, her hair slicked back, her eyes huge in the darkness. He was breathing hard, the adrenaline draining, leaving a raw, vibrating need. He did not plan it. He did not think. He leaned forward, his hands coming up to cup her face, and he kissed her. It was not gentle. It was chaos. It was desperate and fast and brutal, a kiss that tasted of salt, diesel, and wet concrete. It was a raw affirmation of life. We are alive. You are alive. He pressed his forehead to hers, both of them shaking. And in the silence, broken only by their ragged breathing, Ren's small, waterproof scanner, which she had clipped to her bra strap, crackled to life, a voice, filtered and cold, the kite owner. The asset is loose. BUE failed. Change the transfer. The Seagull Sanctuary. Dawn. The Seagull Sanctuary was a misnomer. It was a skeleton, a long-abandoned wooden chapel perched on the edge of the dunes. It had not seen a congregation in 50 years. The wind, now a full gale, screamed through the missing slats, driving sand and sea foam against the rotting structure. It did not sound like a storm. It sounded like a choir of the damned. Ezra kicked the warped door, and it splintered, collapsing inward. They fell into the darkness. The relative silence of the chapel's interior almost as deafening as the wind. The air smelled of salt, dry rot, and guano. Rain hammered the tin roof, the huge cracked. Stained glass windows depicting maritime saints rattled in their frames, threatening to disintegrate. While Ezra, pistol in hand, checked the crumbling vestry, Ren moved through the main aisle. She was not looking for enemies. She was preparing for them. She pulled small, metallic discs from her kit and pressed them firmly against the main wooden support beams and the floorboards by the entrance. Vibration sensors, she said, her voice swallowed by the howl of the wind. Anything heavier than a seagull lands on this structure. My tablet will map it. The main hall was a death trap, too open. Ezra's eyes scanned the shadows and landed on the row of ornate, carved wood confessionals, dark and deep, built into the far wall. He pointed. They slid into the single enclosure meant for the priest. It was a tight, cramped space. They sat on the small bench, their backs against the wooden partition, their knees brushing. The cold was immediate, a penetrating, damp chill that soaked through their wet clothes. The adrenaline from the swim and the chase was fading, and the shivering started, sharp and uncontrollable. We are too cold, Ezra said, his teeth chattering. The wet clothes are a liability. He stripped off his heavy, soaked jacket, tossing it to the floor. Skin contact, we need to share heat. Ren hesitated for less than a heartbeat. She nodded, shrugging out of her own dripping jacket. They pressed together, shoulder to shoulder, hip to thigh, a practical, desperate huddle. Ren tucked her frozen hands under Ezra's arm, pressing them against the warmth of his ribs. He reacted instantly, wrapping his arm around her back, pulling her flush against his side. It was not a lover's embrace. It was a compact for survival. But the shivering in her body began to quiet, replaced by the low, steady thrum of his. Their combined breath fogged in the tiny, dark space. The storm outside was a distant roar. Here, there was only the sound of their breathing and the smell of the old wood. The desire was a silent, third passenger, palpable and sharp, but held in check by the absolute, grounding respect for the danger they were in. "You said I was not a normal waitress," Ren whispered, her voice barely a vibration against his side. "I was not. I used to be what we called a shadow engineer. I ran with a hacktivist collective. We believed in radical transparency. We went after corrupt data brokers, banks." Her voice went flat. "We got too close. My friend, our best coder, he was arrested. The BUI framed him, called him an eco-terrorist. He died in a holding cell. They said he took his own life." She went silent. "I learned that day that transparency is just a word. It just gets people killed if you do not have the power to protect them. So I vanished. I went off the books. I became a waitress. I just wanted to be invisible." Ezra's arm tightened around her. He said nothing, just absorbed the old, cold pain. "My father," he said finally. His own voice, rough and low, was a cold man, efficient. He ran the family like a ledger. Everyone was an asset or a liability. When my mother died, he calculated the cost of the funeral before he signed the death certificate. I have spent my entire adult life trying not to become him. He let out a long, unsteady breath. I'm afraid that to win this, to keep my promise to her, I have to become him, just another empty suit, counting the cost. Ren shifted, pulling back just enough to see his face in the oppressive darkness. She could feel the tension in him, the deep, rigid fear. She raised her free hand, her fingers still icy, and laid them against his jaw. He did not pull away. "They call you darkness. Ezra," she whispered, her gaze holding his. "They call you the heir to that cold legacy, but I have seen you. I saw you in the diner, bleeding but analyzing. I saw you on the pier, refusing to be a package. A cold man would not care. A cold man would have left me at the diner. I see a man who counts every single life, starting with his own." A sound, not the storm, a sharp, explosive crack, followed by the musical shatter of glass. The largest stained glass window exploded inward. A single, brilliant red dot, a laser sight, snapped onto the wall opposite them. Then another, and another. The chapel was suddenly flooded with them, a spider's web of intersecting red lines. A voice, filtered and artificial, boomed from outside. "This is the Bureau of Urban Integrity. The sanctuary is compromised. Exit now." A figure, tall and clad in black tactical gear, stepped through the shattered window frame. His face was hidden by a polished white mask, smooth and beak-like, modeled after a seagull. "The kite owner," Ezra breathed, his hand moving to the pistol tucked in his waistband. "No," the figure said. His voice, though filtered, was familiar. He strode to the center of the chapel. "The kite owner is a client, a concept. I am the broker." The figure reached up and, with a hiss of releasing seals, removed the mask. Even in the gloom, they recognized the impassive, cold features of Deputy Director Heron. "Ren Calder," Heron said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Impressive. The kitchen truth stream was a masterful piece of disruption. My superiors are intrigued." He looked directly at the confessional. "I am authorized to make you an offer, a full pardon, a new identity, a position as an off-book agent, working directly for me. We will even unseal your brother's files for you." He paused. "All you have to do is step out and leave the package." Ezra tensed, ready to move, but Ren's hand on his chest stopped him. She spoke, her voice clear and carrying. "A position that sounds temporary. I would need a guarantee, something in writing." Heron almost smiled. "You are in no position to negotiate." Then you get nothing, Wren countered. He will not come for you. You need me to walk him out. A guarantee. Sign it. She pointed to the heavy, dust-covered leather registry book on the chapel's lectern. Right there. Ezra was already moving. No. He stepped out of the confessional, pushing Wren behind him, his hands raised. The deal is for her, not me. Let her go. Heron, you get what you want. Ezra, no, Wren hissed, grabbing his wrist. He looked back at her, his eyes full of a terrible, final command. Save yourself. She squeezed his wrist, one tap, two, ledger. His breath hitched. He froze. She stepped past him, her head high, walking toward Heron. He is right. The deal is for me. I will sign, too, to make it binding. Wren, what are you doing? Ezra whispered, frantic. Trust me, she breathed back. One more time. She reached the lectern, picked up the ancient pen, and opened the book. Heron watched, smug. She signed her name on the first blank line, a clear, bold, defiant signature, Wren Peregrine. The name was a lie. It was also a digital bomb. It was the exact alias she had used to build the honeypot wallet. The micro camera in her bag, still running, would see it. Her software would recognize it, and in that instant, every alert she had planted in the BUI and Far South networks would trigger, tagging Heron's location with a high-priority agent in distress flag. A pleasure, Miss Peregrine, Heron said, signing his own name below hers. Tell me, Wren said, stalling. Why risk all this for a port? Heron, arrogant in his victory, chuckled. The port you think too small. The port is not the prize. It is the highway. Far South has clients in emerging conflicts. They need a way to move their hardware, their money, their assets. Without oversight, the port is the key to funding a war. And we get to collect the tolls. As he spoke, his tactical radio crackled to life, a frantic, screaming voice. Sir, we have a massive network breach, all priority channels. They are screaming your location. It is the Peregrine alias Howe. Heron's face twisted from triumph to pure, undiluted fury. He raised his sidearm, not at Ezra, but at her. You. Heron's finger was still tightening on the trigger when Wren smiled. It was not a smile of fear. It was the smile of a chess player who had just seen a checkmate in 5 moves. You are live director, she said, her voice clear and calm. Heron's blood ran cold. He looked at the tiny microphone clipped to his lapel, the one he thought was feeding his tactical team. Its indicator light was not the standard BUI green. It was flashing red. This is a Kitchen Truth special report, Wren's voice announced, not from her mouth, but from the speaker of Heron's own radio. Now hijacked, her pre-recorded introduction was broadcasting, piggybacking on his frequency, powered by the digital tripwire of her Wren Peregrine signature. The audio feed from his own microphone and the hidden video from Wren's bag was now streaming globally. We are live at the Seagull Sanctuary, her voiceover declared, where BUI Deputy Director Heron is detailing his partnership with Far South Capital to fund an illegal war by selling the Lake Armitage port. Heron's mask of calm shattered. Cut the feed, cut it, he screamed into his radio. But it was too late. The signal was already bouncing off Wren's network of proxies. The chaos outside the chapel erupted. The bounty hunters, who had been monitoring BUI frequencies and waiting for a sign, heard the broadcast. They did not hear a confession. They heard that the package was at the sanctuary and the deal was going bad. They swarmed the dunes, a frantic tide of greed. The Cotivo crew came from the south, the Turtles of Docks from the north. They met at the chapel steps. They are going to tear each other apart, Ezra said, peering through a crack in the warped wall. He saw the first flash of gunfire in the rain. That is the point, Wren said. But Ezra was already moving. This was not a server room. This was a battlefield, he understood. The south entrance is a bottleneck. The north door is a single plank over the marsh. He moved with a speed Wren had not seen, kicking over a heavy stone lectern, sliding it across the floor to block the main aisle. He was not a fugitive. He was a port commander, directing the flow of chaos, creating choke points, turning the sanctuary into a lethal maze. A shot rang out, loud and sharp, from inside the chapel. Heron cried out, a wet, choking sound, as he collapsed, clutching his thigh. August Peregrine stepped from the shadows of the vestry, a pistol in his hand, his face a mask of false concern. "Ezra, my boy, I got here as fast as I could. I heard them threatening you." He kicked Heron's gun away, a perfect performance of the heroic rescue. Ezra did not lower his own weapon. He had seen too many plays to trust the final act. Wren, however, was not looking at August's face. She was looking at his hands. In his left hand, he clutched a small, silver device, a high-security crypto key. Her blood froze. She recognized the unique metallic gleam from the deepest, oldest files of the Peregrine network. It was the master ledger key, the one that had been reported lost a decade ago. It was not Heron. She breathed, the realization striking her with the force of a physical blow. He was just the muscle. He did not have the key. She locked eyes with August. "You did. You have been the one draining the accounts. You have been Far South's partner from the beginning." August's mask of concern vanished, replaced by a cold, reptilian fury. "She's too smart. Ezra, always your weakness, your mother, and now this waitress." "You set up my father," Ezra said, his voice flat, the betrayal settling like ice in his veins. "You tried to have me killed. For money." For survival, August roared. "Your father was a sentimental fool. Holding on to history, I am a businessman and you are holding up the deal." He raised the silver key fob. "You want your history so badly you can die with it." He pressed his thumb to the device's scanner. A small screen lit up, showing a timer. 90 seconds. "The slate wipe," August sneered. "A little dead man switch I built into the system years ago. In 90 seconds, every byte of Peregrine data, every account, every ledger, every piece of our history is digitally burned, erased forever. Unless, of course, you use that terminal," he nodded at Heron's field laptop, "and transfer 100% control of the docks to Far South, your choice, nephew, your legacy, or your life." Ezra looked at Wren, the weight of his mother's promise crushing him. Wren stepped forward, her face pale but her voice like steel. "Or option 3. "There is no option 3, you stupid girl." "You call it the slate wipe. I call it the double contract," Wren countered, her hand moving to her own bag. "You think I did not find your little time bomb? I found it last week. You erase your history. Fine." She held up a small, identical USB drive. "This is a full copy. The real ledger. The one you have been cooking the books on. For the last 2 days, it has been sitting in the metadata of the harbor and hashes weekly produce orders. If your timer hits 0, my system automatically emails that ledger to 3 international press agencies. You do not just lose your legacy, you lose your freedom. You, Far South, and Director Heron." The air crackled. The bluff was on the table. August, realizing he had been outmaneuvered by a woman he had dismissed, snapped. He dropped the useless fob and lunged, pulling a long, curved dock knife from his belt. Ezra met him, drawing his own blade. It was a fight of pure, brutal inheritance. The sound of steel on steel echoed through the chapel. Fast and violent, they were too evenly matched. Trained in the same school of close-quarters harbor fighting, Wren would not let Ezra die for this. She saw the heavy industrial spotlight the BUI team had brought in, its cord plugged into a portable generator. She grabbed the metal housing hot to the touch and twisted it, aiming the 1,000-watt beam directly into August's face. He roared, blinded, as Ezra's knife disarmed him. At that exact moment, the real BUI tactical team, the one not on Heron's payroll, the one summoned by Wren's high-priority Wren Peregrine distress signal, burst through the remaining doors. "Bu, drop your weapons. Hands in the air." They found a scene of utter confusion, August, blinded and disarmed, Heron bleeding on the floor, and the bounty hunters outside, still fighting each other. It was over. But Wren was scrambling for the timer. August's fob, dropped on the wet floor, was still glowing. The countdown was still active. "It is not a dead man's switch," she gasped, her voice ragged. "It is a firewall. It is not connected to him. It is running." Ezra grabbed her. "Can you stop it?" The timer showed 55 seconds. "Not from here. It is locked to the physical mainframe. We have to kill it at the source." "Where?" Ren pointed through the shattered window, into the teeth of the storm, toward a single, blinking red light on the edge of the darkest pier. "The nesting box. The dockside server hub. We have to get there. Now." Ezra did not wait for the BUI to understand. He locked eyes with her, a single, silent exchange, together. He grabbed her hand. "Go!" he yelled, and they plunged out of the wrecked chapel, leaving the agents and the arrests behind. They ran, hand in hand, disappearing into the screaming wind, racing the clock as it ticked down toward 0. The nesting box was not a building. It was a metal skeleton, clinging to the edge of the pier against the screaming wind. The server hub was housed in a reinforced container, but the storm had torn a panel from its side, exposing the room to the sea. Salt spray and rain lashed the racks of processors. Sparks erupted from a compromised power junction. And the clock was ticking, 40 seconds. "The main drive is across," that Ren yelled, pointing. The floor had collapsed, leaving a 10-foot gap. The only way across was a single, narrow steel I-beam, slick with salt water. "I need to attach a cold bridge directly to the port. It is the only way to bypass the wipe." Ezra looked at the beam, then at the churning, black water visible below. He was already stripping a heavy-duty electrical cable from the wall, testing its strength. "You go. I anchor you." He looped the cable around her waist, securing it with a knot he knew would hold, and wrapped the other end twice around his own arm, bracing his feet against the mainframe. "I have you. Go." Ren did not hesitate. She stepped onto the beam. The wind tore at her. A physical blow. 30 seconds, Ezra yelled. His voice was a lifeline, a solid thing in the chaos. Ren moved, one foot in front of the other, her arms out for balance, the small, custom-built bridge device clutched in her hand. Just the beam. Ren, nothing else. Ezra's voice came from behind her, low and steady, not shouting, but projecting. He was counting her rhythm, keeping her centered. That is it. One more step. 20 seconds. His arm, anchored to the cable, was a steel rod, but his shoulder, where the glass had grazed him, was on fire. A metal door at the far end of the hub slammed open. August. He was not cuffed. In the confusion at the chapel, he had grabbed a fallen BUI agent's gun. He was limping, his face a mask of pure hate. "The family dies," he screamed, raising the pistol, aiming not at Ezra, but at the most vulnerable target, at Ren. Ezra did not have time to think. He roared, a primal sound, and yanked the cable. Ren was pulled backward, a sudden, violent jerk that saved her life. The bullet pinged off the I-beam, exactly where she had been. She fell from the beam, not into the water, but into the gap, saved by the cable. She hung, suspended, a few feet above the churning sea. August fired again. Ezra twisted, letting the bullet take him in the flesh of his shoulder, the same one that was already bleeding. He grunted, the pain blinding, but he did not let go of the line. "Ren, 10 seconds," he bellowed, his voice raw. "Pull me up slow," she screamed. He hauled, hand over hand, his muscles screaming, the blood soaking his shirt. She scrambled, finding her footing back on the broken floor. 7 seconds. She did not look at him. She did not check his wound. She sprinted the last 5 feet, launched herself at the server rack, and slammed the cold bridge into the master port. Her fingers flew, a blur of motion. "Wipe sequence override, engage." A voice from the shadows. "Drop it." Heron, his face pale, his leg bleeding, had limped in behind August. He, too, had a gun. He was cornered, his career and life over. Ren's fingers were still typing, and far south main accounts, lock, 5 seconds, Ezra yelled. Heron pulled the trigger. Ezra lunged, shoving Ren forward, twisting his body to cover hers. The bullet missed them both. Striking the main power junction Ren was plugged into. There was no sound, just a blinding, silent explosion of blue-green light, a massive, deafening pop as 1,000,000 volts of energy arced. Throwing them backward, the entire world went white. Then darkness, silence. The timer on the floor, its screen cracked, blinked 0000. The only light came from the server rack, a single, small, steady green indicator. The Peregrine ledger was stable. The Far South accounts were frozen, their illegal holdings exposed and locked. In the sudden, terrible quiet, there was only the sound of the receding storm. August and Heron were silent, half buried under a collapsed rack. Ezra pushed himself up, his body a map of pain. He looked at Ren. She was sitting on the wet steel floor, shaking, her face smudged with soot. He did not say a word. He sat down, his back against the wall, and pulled her into his arms, his good arm wrapping around her, his bleeding one shielding her. He buried his face in her hair, which smelled of ozone and the sea. They trembled, from the cold, from the adrenaline, from the simple, crushing relief of being alive. He tilted her chin up. His kiss was not the desperate, raw hunger of the canal. It was not the electric spark of the study. It was slow and deep and profoundly gentle. It tasted of salt and smoke and survival. It was a silent, unbreakable promise. The aftermath was quiet. The BUI, now under emergency leadership, cleaned its own house. Heron and August were arrested. Far South Capital was called before Congress, their assets frozen, their illegal war funding exposed by a single, anonymous data drop. The harbor and hash reopened. It was no longer just a diner. It was the Harbor Hub, a community outreach center and digital security school, managed and funded by Ren Calder, teaching the people of the port how to stay safe in a world of data. Ezra Peregrine legalized his inheritance. He channeled the clean assets into the new Seagull Foundation, a massive investment fund dedicated to rebuilding the docks, focusing on green shipping and port technology. He was, in the eyes of the city, a legitimate philanthropist. But to the shadows, he was still the Dawn, the protector of the coast, colder and smarter than his father ever was. The final scene found them on a warm night, months later. The city was celebrating the Festival of Lights. On the roof of the old harbor and hash, away from the noise, Ren was leaning back against Ezra's chest, watching the fireworks. She was whispering, "And if we route the profits from the new terminal, we can fund the breakfast program for the whole dockside. And I have a new idea for the youth apprenticeship program, mixing coding with marine biology." Ezra listened, his arms wrapped around her. He smiled, a slow, genuine smile. "You moved in, Ren," he murmured, his voice a low rumble against her hair. "And you became the chief engineer of this city's heart." She tilted her head back, looking up at him. He leaned down, their foreheads touching. He put his hand on her wrist, and she covered it with her own. One tap, two taps, their silent, shared password. The storm was over. They were the calm. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We are so grateful to have you here. Let us know in the comments where you are listening from. We would love to connect and hear your thoughts. Please subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Story, and give this video a like. And if you enjoyed this, please consider hitting the hype button to help this story be heard by more people.